Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 23 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. Episode 22 was actually a combined episode with Fracking Nightmare last week, live from Crawberry Hill in East Yorkshire. And that episode is not up on YouTube, but it is up on Bambuser. So if you follow the links from my Facebook page or the Humanity versus Insanity Facebook page, you can find it if you hadn't seen it already. Now, this evening I'm back in Plymouth, and I'll be back in Plymouth for the next 2 weeks. With so much going on, I can't afford to be away in the north of England right now for too long. So I'm joined tonight. I have a guest in the studio, and this is Mr. Danny Bamping. Good evening, Danny.
Evening, Ian.
And Danny has joined me this evening because some of you may recall that in the last episode that I did from Plymouth, where we were talking about the upcoming Scottish referendum, I mentioned that we would be talking about a new political paradigm, which may actually put the proverbial cat amongst the political pigeons here in England. Because we're just 3 days away now from the historic opportunity that the Scottish people have to become independent. Now, over the last 60-odd years, some 45 countries around the world have had the opportunity to become independent. And every one of those countries has grasped that opportunity with both hands. So I know that there are other individuals who work with UK Column who have a somewhat different opinion. But I must confess, and I lay my cards right on the table, I think the Scottish people would be absolutely crazy not to take this God-given opportunity to extricate themselves from the socio-psychopaths of Westminster. Now, the problem is, are they going to simply go from the proverbial frying pan into a much hotter fire? If Alex Salmond maintains his link with the pound sterling, then Scotland will not be independent. If Alex Salmond throws his hat into the ring with the EU, Scotland will not be independent. If the vote goes the way I believe it will go, unless, of course, it's manipulated. If the Scottish people take this opportunity, there has to be a massive churning within the Scottish establishment. A new bank has to be established. The Bank of Scotland has to be a standalone bank using the model of Dakota, the only state in the US that operates outside the Federal Reserve System. It's not rocket science, but it does require a tangible effort to extricate from the Rothschilds-controlled central banking system. And if Scotland goes this way, Scotland has the opportunity to be an incredibly wealthy country. Ireland should be one of the wealthiest countries in the EU because of its position at the far western edge of the EU, and its access to the significant offshore resources. But the Irish economy was manipulated into the proverbial toilet by the EU and the global corporatists. So consequently, Ireland today, regrettably, is little more than a vassal state of the EU. And some 40 years of fluoridation of the water supply in Ireland have ensured that the Irish population has lost all of that Celtic passion. So consequently, unfortunately, the Irish are effectively condemned to a life, certainly for the foreseeable future, of absolute EU subjugation. So the Scots absolutely need to know what it is that they're stepping into. And as I touched on in the last episode, the other issue that needs to be addressed in Scotland is the free Masonic oligarchy. And already we've seen the Scottish police all merge under one corporate banner. We've seen the Scottish police moving towards a wider arming of the police. We've also, of course, got the experience of Robert Greene, who's been under house arrest now for some 150-odd days, simply for trying to raise awareness about the abuse within the Scottish system. So it's not going to be an easy ride. The Scottish people are certainly not going to be able to celebrate too early, because they may well be being manipulated by the global corporatist elite so that they can literally grasp the phenomenal natural resources that surround Scotland. Not only the oil, but then, of course, Scotland also has phenomenal resources of fresh water. And with fresh water being the new oil, with more and more the financial and the economic media discussing water as the commodity of the future, then Scotland has that in abundance. Now, David Cameron has been desperate to try and suppress the magnitude of the resources surrounding Scotland, but it is a relatively conservative estimate that with advancing technology, Scotland is probably sitting on something pushing towards about £1 trillion worth of recoverable hydrocarbon assets. So this is a tremendous opportunity, and I, for one, wish the Scottish people every success in their quest for independence. Now, I saw a cartoon. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of it, but I did see a cartoon a few days ago where the people from the north of England had said that if Scotland does become independent, then the north of England wants to go with Scotland. And the north of England was defined as everything north of the M62. And I can certainly perhaps understand that. And once Scotland does become independent, then perhaps the rest of the country will start to realise that it's about time that we became independent of the existing socio-psychopathic global corporatist elite and looked to recover our own independent individual sovereignty. And that's exactly where Danny comes in, because Danny, you have been considering the possibility of breaking the existing political paradigm for some time.
Well, I have, yeah, and been looking at it for a while. But just, to have the Scotland link, I was involved and still am involved with Forvik, which is a small island off the coast of Scotland, and obviously up near Shetland, and Stuart up there took it as a sovereign nation. And when you look at what Forvik has done for people to be able to kind of recognise being a sovereign nation, and of course Shetland never became part of Scotland. So Shetland Islanders, in a way, have got this other paradigm of vote of saying, well, hold on a minute, we were never with you in the first place. So Shetland should be voting, do we stay with Scotland and go with wherever they go, or shall we have our own vote and go completely on our own, because they are actually a sovereign nation. And of course Shetland is where all the oil is. And as we've already, you probably come on to later, all the dipsticks are in Parliament. So, and that's the way that it is, really. And I think it's a land grab, because there's a lodal title law over there in Scotland. They've got different laws for the police. They've got their own currency in a way already with they've got Scottish banknotes, which are kind of backed by sterling. So you start to, and then you look at the last three prime ministers, Blair, Brown, Cameron, are all Scottish. And you start to think, what's going on here? Maybe there's something more to meet the eye.
Well, maybe there is. Huh? Maybe there is. So, I mean, first of all, we can agree to differ here.
Okay.
I mean, so I have absolutely no issue if you have a difference of opinion. But do you think that the people of Scotland should take this opportunity and grasp it with both hands?
I do, and I think when you mentioned the stat earlier, 45 countries in the past have been given this opportunity, take sovereignty or not. And I can't see that stat being 45-1 and the Scottish people saying no. And I think, if I was a broadcaster, I'd be putting on Braveheart on Wednesday night, and making sure that everybody watches that. And I think the thing is that, I can't think of, probably the Welsh are more maybe, the nationalism, where it shines through kind of thing. They're more proud of their nation, I suppose, than anybody. But then right behind them is Scotland. When you look at how proud the Scottish people are just for being Scottish, and I think being given the opportunity to say, yeah, 2 fingers up down there, we're on our own now, I think that's perfect. But I think the other thing is, Salmon's already said they'll stay within the EU. You know, and that's like a, you know, it's like an oxymoron.
I think Salmond is a problem. I think Alex Salmond is a problem. I mean, he's obviously the man of the moment in terms of taking Scotland out of the Union.
He's just a vehicle.
Absolutely.
And it's what happens after him.
Yeah.
You know, and who's going to be the guy that takes them out of Europe? Because that's the key. I mean,
yeah.
You know, in the NoTa, in No Thank You Party manifesto that we're constructing at the moment, we're saying we're not even going to have a referendum on coming out of Europe. We're just going to come out. There's no need to ask because we know that everybody's saying no. So what's the point? It'd be a waste of time and money.
Well, they would argue, the establishment would argue that they're not going to have a referendum because everyone will say yes. So,
well, exactly. So we'll have one because we don't need one because with everybody, we know that everybody wants to come out. So makes sense.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, I think a referendum absolutely gives it credence.
Yeah, it would. But obviously Cameron promised that, didn't he, last time? And
well, that's why there is no referendum, because he knows that the vast majority of people will want to come out.
And there you go. And I think this is the thing with politics, is that I've begun to realise is that, like I'm sure everybody else out there, is that they lie through their teeth just to get there. And then when they get there, they completely, you know, regate on their pledges or their promises or whatever, and they don't carry through what they promise.
Well, that's because they're told the facts of life. I mean, I think, you know, it's probably fair to say that all these politicians go into politics with altruistic intent, but they're very quickly educated as to who the real power brokers are, who their paymasters are, and basically what will happen if they don't literally toe the proverbial party line.
Well, there are exceptions to the rule.
There are.
You know,
that's
Skinner is one of them. You know, in the Labour Party, and he's, you know, a working man in Parliament. And obviously you got George Galloway, you know, Respect Party and all that kind of stuff. So there are some exceptions to the rule. And I think the thing is that the reason why I've done what I've done is set up a new political party which enables people to vote no. You know, because people are voting no by not voting.
Well, let's have a look at this. Is your logo here. This is the No Thank You Party. Now, of course, NoTa, I think originated, or the first time I came across it was in the United States.
Yeah.
And then, of course, what happened was that the US introduced legislation outlawing NoTa because they realised that there was, you know, a lot of people who didn't want any of the establishment politicians. They didn't want the Republicans, they didn't want the Democrats, they didn't want, what was it, Ross Perot's Libertarian Party or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they put NoTa, and then they outlawed it.
And that's the Electoral Commission in this country in 2005 did exactly the same thing. So nobody could set up a political party called none of the above. And the reason why, I believe, is because they're frightened of it. They're frightened of it because if everybody was given that choice, that's probably most likely what they would tick or cross. And I think, you know, when you look at the rules, you can't also have a party called Put Your Mark Here or Put Your Cross Here. I thought it was quite genius, really. But what we've done is say, well, OK, we want to say no, but we also want to say no thank you. So we're polite for a start, but also NoTa abbreviates to none of the above. So in a sense, we're being a kind of see-through Trojan horse politically to have a kind of political revolution to put another option on the ballot paper so that people have got an option where in the future, if you look at some of our policies, you know, our pledges, NoTa to the TV licence. You know, we would privatise the BBC. Or we might even look at nationalising it. But I think privatisation is better because, you know, when you look at what they do abroad, you know, BBC Worldwide and earns millions from the copyrights from the programmes generated that were funded from the taxpayer, you know, the whole thing is nuts. And you know, turn that around and let everybody buy a share of it.
But one of the issues with that, I mean, for example, I mean, if it's privatised, then, I mean, it becomes part of the corporatocracy. And so what we've provided is perhaps the corporatocracy for another PR vehicle.
Well, there maybe the other way to look at it is to nationalise it, you know, because we want to really nationalise all our energy services. Because, you know, Maggie came along and privatised everything. So water, gas, electric are run for profit. They're not run for the people. You know, and when you get something plugged into your house and it's on tap, it's paid for already, you know.
I absolutely concur. So, I mean, you know, same in Scotland. I mean, one of the things that Scotland absolutely has to do is nationalise the oil industry, or threaten to nationalise it, and completely, you know, renegotiate the arrangement, the contracts that it has with the major companies. I mean, BP saying, you know, they pull out of Scotland. Yeah. Well, my response would be adios, amigo. You know, we'll find a solution. And the Scots,
same with the water. It needs to
absolutely. You know, the Scots have a lot of expertise. I mean, more so than in England regarding oil because of Aberdeen. But interestingly, as I said and pointed out 2 weeks ago, the Scots have all the oil, and the British English have all the gas.
Yep.
So, you know, there's some perhaps trade there anyway. But
well, coming on to gas, I mean, you know, the No Thank You Party would ban fracking, which I know was, you know, would certainly get your approval.
Oh, in a heartbeat.
Well, yeah, but I mean, France has done it, Germany's done it. We should be doing it, you know. And we're the only party, apart from maybe the Green Party, saying that maybe they'll ban it, you know. And this is the other thing is that, you know, the other parties are all for nuclear war, right? Or they're all for war. They're all for privately owned banks. They're all for, you know, staying in Europe. And we're saying the opposite. So, you know, we're completely opposite, you know, from all the mainstream parties. And that's why our kind of official colours, if you like, are black and white. We're not blue, you know, we're not green, we're not yellow, we're not red. We're black and white. And that says a lot, really, I think, you know, because we're trying to be black and white. We're trying to be transparent. And I think the other thing is we've got rules like you can't represent us, you can't stand for us in Parliament if you're a Mason. Yeah, so we want to try to outlaw that because you were saying about...
But that's a secret society, so how are you going to know?
Well, this is the thing. We have to have a tough vetting process, really. But, I mean, what we're saying is, you know, that people like Mick Harvey, you know, Michael Doherty, Guy Taylor, maybe Roger Hayes, maybe even Brian Gerrish, all these people, who maybe even yourself, Ian, you know, well, exactly, heaven forbid, but, you know, could stand for the No Thank You Party to be the alternative because, you know, I think we're there for the people that are awake, and we're there for the people who've had enough. And
well, actually, it would be there surely for everybody.
Well, of course, but what I'm going to come on to is the fact that we're there for everybody who's disillusioned with politics, which is probably 90% of people, and also for those people that don't normally vote. You know, and that's what I want to try and get, is the people that don't normally vote to come to the ballot, you know, the voting booth, the polling station, and come and put a cross next to no.
I mean, basically, obviously, politics has been driven by the media, is driven by the media. I mean, the Sun have effectively, Trevor Kavanagh and Rupert Murdoch have effectively put pretty much every Prime Minister into 10 Downing Street, possibly since certainly 1992.
Yeah.
With the infamous, you know, with the last person to leave Britain, please turn out the lights, which absolutely nailed Kinnock's chances.
Yeah.
Of ever becoming Prime Minister. Now, politics has become, I mean, I won't say sort of a personality cult, but nonetheless, the leader of the party has been very, very important, particularly in terms of their ability to deal with the media. So how is NoTa going to be structured? Who is the leader of the NoTa party?
Well, at the moment, it's me, unfortunately.
How many members do you have?
Yeah, just the one. No, we have quite a lot, actually. I'd say it was in the low hundreds at the moment. But the website is 90% there. We've not officially launched it there yet because we submitted our paperwork, if you like, to the Electoral Commission a couple of months ago. I phoned them today to get an update, and they're going to be another week or so, and we should hear any one way or the other if there's an issue. At the moment, they're saying everything's fine. They just have to go through their review committee, like everybody who applies to become a political party, to make sure that we've got the I's and cross the T's and all that kind of stuff.
So at the moment, it's ostensibly your baby in this country. Okay. Yeah. So you say that you've got the low hundreds. How many people have you got you have identified roles for in that party, or is it still emerging?
Well, they're still emerging, but there is, you know, we have got a Skype group now, which is really kind of, you know, talking in most days and stuff, and trying to isolate, you know, who's going to be the campaign manager, who's going to stand in this constituency, because we've got to find 650 good people. You know, that's the key.
And how much do you have to pay now to...
It's £500 each.
£500?
Yeah, there's your deposit, So that's 325 grand and some. So, you know, you start looking at a lot of money, but... You know, the Monster Raving Loony Party, which was set up from Plymouth, actually.
That was Lord Such.
Lord Such, who's passed away.
Sadly.
But the people who ran the party, one guy was in Plymouth and one guy was up the boat road in Ashburton. So they used to have a regular donator of £500,000. So that meant every election they could make sure there was somebody from the Monster Raving Loony Party on the ballot paper. And now, obviously, we're trying to do it ourselves. So we're looking to raise money. We're looking at alternatives, and we're looking at, you know, famous people, if you like, who have said, like Paxman or Jon Snow or Russell Brand.
Sorry.
Exactly, but I think the thing is, obviously Russell's got a bit like a vehicle, a bit like salmon. He's a vehicle, and Russell Brand, as I see it, is there's a connection between the sheeple
and Rothschilds,
and and Rothschilds and us. But I think the thing is, that
Russell goes home to his £15 million mansion in Oxfordshire.
What I'm trying to say is
to his partner, who is.
I'm not saying, we haven't even approached him, but what I'm saying is,
a goldsmith.
He said if there was a none of the above, he would stand for it. He would support that. And that's kind of what we are. What I'm trying to get off the back of Russell Brand is some publicity.
Okay.
Yeah, because he's our link to the mainstream. Yeah. You see,
that when Russell Brand wants to slum it, he goes off to his $15 million mansion in Los Angeles.
I'm sure he's earned a lot of money from what he's done. But what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, he's there as a means to an end. And if we can piggyback on the back of him to get into the mainstream, because a political party that says...
How about piggybacking on an ethos?
Well, yeah, there is an ethos as well, but I'm just trying to make a point, is that at the end of the day, it's like we've got a political party that says get rid of the BBC, get rid of the licence fee, then we're not going to get any coverage on the BBC in the next 8 months, any whatsoever.
That would be about right.
Well, exactly. So this is my point.
A bit like Scotland, really.
Well, possibly, yeah, exactly. Put a yes sign up there, and it's good, isn't it? I saw the clip. So I think the thing is that at the end of the day, we're trying to get out into the mainstream, and if we can get into the mainstream and get some national papers to pick up on it, this is an option next May. You can vote no. But I think also that
let me throw something at you.
Well,
okay, because you said get the papers to pick this up.
Social media has changed a lot.
Social media,
of course, yeah.
Because the likelihood of getting the mainstream media to pick this up is about slim to none.
Possibly, but I'm an optimist. But I think the social media is the key.
Yes.
Obviously, because this landscape, this playing field for this election has changed, and we know that social media can have a massive impact on what happens in the mainstream media, because it can affect it.
I would absolutely agree.
And this is the thing, is that if the kind of social media get behind this as the alternative to all the other options that we've had, a bit like you said earlier about America only having 2 options, then somebody comes up with another option, and it looks a bit grey. But this is what we're trying to do with this: is be the no option, be that alternative option, and get people who aren't paedophiles, who are just normal people, and get them in Parliament. So that we can have the right representation, and we get rid of things like private banks who just generate money out of fresh air, the no accountable police force, no Trident project, all that kind of stuff can be completely turned on its head.
So policies for the people,
obviously,
put forward by the people.
Exactly, and we're encouraging people to say, have an effect on what we're trying to put forward. Come forward with your ideas, so that we can look at our policy and maybe say, we might not have that right. This woman's got a really good idea for a good policy. We should maybe look at it and adopt it. Every political party gets 450 grand a year, or can apply for policy research. Yeah, policy research. So all those main parties are spending all this money on doing this policy research, and actually, the policy research is there on the web via the people. The people can come up with the policies, and I think that's what we want to do, is maybe create a thing in the future where, that people can maybe vote on things like Europe and Trident, these, and the banks and all this kind of stuff, and make sure that they have an actual voice maybe every 3 months rather than every 5 years.
So let's just have a look at these policies. This is just a summary. Obviously, this is not definitive, but it just gives people an idea. No war. Well, I think, okay, that's a very generic statement, but I think that that would certainly probably appeal to a significant chunk of the population.
Exactly.
Certainly all those that are not socio-psychopaths.
Exactly, and when you look at the other parties, no other party puts forward a peaceful pledge. Yeah. They're all supporting the actions out there.
How about no green screen beheadings?
Well, that would be a good one, wouldn't it? Yeah, exactly. this propaganda stuff that's going on is that's why maybe it's best to privatise the BBC, so we don't get reports of buildings falling down before they do, and lies shown on the BBC, and they edit what they want.
And Jihadi John sort of commuting to Pinewood Studios every morning.
Well, exactly, all this kind of stuff, and people who are awake, get that. But not everybody's awake, and there has to be that link to the sheeple.
Oh, I really dislike that word.
Okay.
I really dislike that word. Listen, I mean, everyone is at a different stage of their journey, and as I'm going to be discussing a little bit later on in Fracking Nightmare tonight, it actually doesn't take very much for people to descend into cognitive dissonance. Sometimes it can literally be just a small sum of money, and that's enough to enable them to go, oh, I don't want to see that. And then switch. But I mean, I wouldn't denigrate them because of that. Because eventually something will trigger, if you like, them to open their minds and perhaps reconsider that. And that's the
don't need to be derogatory.
Right.
At the end of the day, they're just obviously not where we are in terms of their understanding about what's going on.
You make a lot of assumptions. I'm a perennial student. I don't know anything. But let's have a look here. So no TV licenses.
I think that'll get a lot of support.
I think a lot of support. No injustices. Well, yeah, that's a pretty all-encompassing one. No Trident. Well, we may not have Trident anyway because they may be in Scotland.
Well, this is the thing. It's that
they may be in Faslane. They might not make it back across the border.
But that might, the Scottish, when they become...
They might say, we don't want it.
Exactly, and they might hand it back.
Well, exactly. Play ping pong with Trident.
Well, the way that I look at our nuclear policy is people said, oh, you can't just get away with it. You can't get rid of them. And I'm thinking, well, hold on a minute. When you look at the nuclear powers around the world, it's all about how many they've got. I think Russia's got the biggest stockpile. Yeah, but when you look at it, it's all a kind of penis game. Who's got the biggest penis? With a nuclear weapon.
Well, I must confess that I would probably err on the side of keeping Trident on the basis that we've got a lot of socio-psychopaths out there.
Right.
And look at what they did with Saddam Hussein. Look at what they did with Gaddafi. They manipulated these people into effectively disarming themselves so that they could waltz in and take over their natural resources. And I think, we have to recognise that history can well be repeated. So we would keep it perhaps as a deterrent, but it would be clear that deterrent is against the socio-psychopaths of...
But there's no need to sit on like 3,000 nuclear warheads.
So well, probably not, no.
So that's my point, is that...
Just one aimed at the Rothschild.
Exactly. So I think the thing is that we keep maybe 9, and put a flag for for the Russians, for America, for France, and whatever, and just leave them there, for North Korea. So that
I'd name them. I'd name the individuals. I mean, the Rockefeller,
and I've one. They're just there for spare.
Kissinger and Brzezinski and Netanyahu, and I would just say, okay, guys, any fracking around.
Well, exactly.
And,
I think the thing is, in the Cold War and what's happened since is that it's all become we've got more nuclear warheads than you. And what I'm saying is that became a penis enlargement game. And what I'm saying is none of them have got the balls, to get rid of them.
I agree.
And that's where we're at.
I agree. Well, I mean, I think, I applaud everything it is that you're trying to do, but I think we've also got to be pragmatic and recognise this, just as I've berated Alex Salmon, because I certainly, and as you made the analogy, it's like perhaps, when you set up a business, the guy that gets the business started, oh, that's my phone. Having told you to get your phone off.
I'm not saying anything.
No, good. Smart move. Just as the guy who sets up the small business is the entrepreneur, but he's not necessarily the person who then takes it to the next level, and that person isn't necessarily the person takes it beyond that level.
Of course, yeah.
So Alex Salmon is certainly the man of the moment, and then what it needs is the Scottish to sort of reevaluate perhaps what it is that they're doing, the direction they're going, and not assume that Alex or the current Freemasonic oligarchy are actually going to be looking after their best interests, because they're definitely not. So they've got to look at how they take that forward. And I think what you are doing here, this initiative that you've taken, has definitely got some mileage. I mean, it's definitely worthy of further pursuit.
It is, because as an entrepreneur, I looked at it and I thought there's a gap in the market there. 65% of the people who are on the electoral register voted in 2010. When you boil those numbers down, that's not really a good representation of the people in Britain today. And what I'm trying to do is get people off their bums, next May, to just go out for 10 minutes and go and put a little cross on a bit of paper, because actually you're not getting another voice for another 5 years or whatever it'll be. And the thing is that because they're set in their ways, yeah. They either vote red or they vote blue, or they're a bit disillusioned and sometimes they vote yellow, you know. And those that are asleep vote UKIP, you know, because that's exactly what they are. They're sleeping. So the way that I look at it is that people need another viable option. There needs to be a revolution in politics. There needs to be another party that comes up and said, let's do something completely different. Because that's what's needed. Yep. And that's what we're putting forward.
So, listen, if I'm thinking about aligning myself with a political party, let me just go through my list here. So, getting out of the EU. And that the NoTa's, your stance at the moment on that would be out of the EU.
In the first document we wrote, we would have a referendum within a year. But now we're looking at it going, we'll just come out of the EU.
And make that effectively a policy
that
people would vote for.
Yeah, because rather than actually, you know, it's got so bad, I don't think anybody wants to continue. Okay. It's a bit like the TV licence. They can't justify that anymore. Yeah, they've covered up paedophilia. They're earning up loads of money abroad. You know, they've broken their charter 4 times in 18 months. You know, there's no way that they can justify it going forward. The MPs have voted to say decriminalise it. So... all those hearings are clogging up the courts.
So actually,
it doesn't make sense.
What's happened over the last 7 years has actually set the scene for this to occur.
Of course,
because I can remember 8 years ago when I mentioned fractional reserve banking. It was 2006, and I mean we could see the crash coming. Yeah. And I mentioned fractional reserve banking, and I could see that 3/4 of my audience, their eyes sort of glazed over. I pushed it a little bit too far. Now, of course, we talk about fractional reserve banking, and everyone pretty much in the room has got a good idea what it's all about.
Yeah, right.
And so the fact that the global corporatists manipulated the financial collapse has actually served us very, very well, because now when we talk about this, enough people understand. Yeah. The same with the EU. This rapid drift towards federalism with now some 90,000+ EU statutes queuing up to be rubber stamped into British legislation. Madness, exactly. And people, you know, have always seen the madness of some of the bureaucratic legislation coming out of Brussels. Yeah. But now they're ready to say hasta la vista. So that's helped us in that respect.
Of course.
So, and of course, the paedophilia. You know, we've seen that, you know, those who consider themselves to be part of the establishment, whether that's the aristocracy or the political elite, or simply those that have just kissed butt to ingratiate themselves.
The timing is perfect.
It is.
Because of all these things, like you said, have led up to this, and everybody's had enough. You know, more people I speak to are like, I'm not even going to vote next May. And I'm saying, no, vote.
We must vote.
We must vote, but we must vote no. And that's nobody's ever put no on the ballot paper before, you know, and no's the most strongest word in the English language. And we don't use it often enough, you know, because a lot of these things in this common law country are consensual, you know. And so it's like council tax, you know. I was made unlawfully bankrupt for not paying council tax, you know, and I refuse to pay my water bill, you know, because the stuff is falling from the sky for free and they're polluting it with chemicals and stuff. I can't sue the water company and I can't be cut off because they can't cut any domestic property off. So why anybody's paying their water?
So what are you left with at the moment? Nothing more than civil disobedience.
Of course, and that's the thing. It's the most
and individual lawful rebellion.
Of course, and that's the thing, is that the most important thing is for people to be able to say no, and that's enough is enough. And if everybody did it, then we'd finally have some change. And it is civil disobedience, because that's what allows everything to continue, is our civil obedience. You know, everybody being obedient, and what you allow is what will continue.
And there's no question, is there? I mean, the version of democracy that we have in this country, and I'll use that term very loosely, absolutely relies on non-participation. Yep. It relies on people making the vote, ticking the box, and they'll manipulate it anyway if they really want to, through postal votes.
Might they not do on Thursday?
They might well do on Thursday.
If it comes out...
20% of people in Scotland voting via postal vote? I don't think so. I mean, that just defies belief.
It just ups the level of corruption that can be.
And the postal vote was used blatantly in England, well, in the UK, in the 2005 election to make sure that Tony Blair got re-elected. Because how absurd is this? You know, Tony Blair was at the bottom of his popularity in 2005 after the illegal wars of Afghanistan and Iraq, but they couldn't afford to have either a dead duck prime minister or a prime minister that didn't even get elected. So they manipulated the vote in Sedgefield with postal votes, so that his majority in 2005 was even greater than his majority at the previous election. How absurd is that?
Didn't make it obvious then?
Well, basically what they're really doing is that to the electorate. They're saying, you know what, we can manipulate this in whatever way we want.
Because we're in control.
Because we can.
And because we're in control. It really is
and they rely on people going, oh, well, there you go, what can we do about it? Well, we can, of course. We can, of course, do something about it.
And this is the thing, is that people have the power, but they only have the power when they come together and they work as one. And that's the thing, is that I'm trying to bring everybody together under this banner, to have a force, and so it becomes a voice.
Well, and a critical element of this as well, surely, and I mean, this is where the establishment really works very well, is, of course, driving the wedges and keeping the proletariat focused on those issues upon which they disagree, as opposed to putting the egos to one side and saying, look, yes, of course we're going to have different opinions on this. I mean, I find this in the anti-fracking movement. I mean, there are people who their primary motivation is climate change. And because I say, well, actually, that's not my primary motivation. My primary motivation is the protection of the water. And they go, oh, no, unless you make climate change your priority, then you can't be part of our group. Well,
Aren't you on the same side, though?
Well, of course, this is what plays straight into the hands of the establishment.
Of course,
Because
infighting.
Absolutely. And instead of people saying, okay, you know what, we disagree on these issues, on some aspects of this, but actually we agree on this. And if we focus on what we agree upon rather than getting bogged down on what we disagree upon, that's when we are incredibly powerful.
And that's when you make a difference.
Absolutely.
That's all I'm trying to do with NoTa is give people another option. And I think that's it's gathering momentum, and through the social media, it may well turn up.
So I think if this technology works, as I think it might, or it might not, famous last words and all that. Let's see if we could just pull this across. There we go. Look at that up on the screen. It's worked. So this is the NoTa website. So this is where people can go. So it's no-tar.org.uk. Okay, and is that the homepage I'm on there? No, that's not the homepage. But there's the homepage. Welcome to the No Thank You party. But that's, of course, no thank you to all the BS that's being pumped out by the politicians who are little more than the puppets of the global corporatists. And there's our countdown. 233 days to the next election. So 233 days isn't a long time, but on the other hand, what is it that said a day is a long time in politics?
It is, and I think that's a good few months there. And
it is,
and it's a lot of time for us to gather momentum and stuff, and maybe have a couple of annual general meetings and stuff, and a party conference. And I think it'll be quite interesting to see where it goes and who gets involved and what happens next. Okay,
so basically what you're promoting here is a one-year membership for £10. So what does that £10 get you?
Well, basically, there'll be a different part of the website for members only, and we're trying to do, obviously, a weekly newsletter and stuff that you'd only get if you're a member, and invites to all the regional events, and obviously the AGM and the conference.
So is there actually a committee established yet?
Well, there's a small committee, that's what we've got, and that's what we're moving forward with, and then there's other people like Michael Doherty, I'm sure you're aware of, who
absolutely
he's involved in his court case this week. But we're talking to Michael about coming on board because he's already announced that he's standing.
And Guy Taylor,
Guy Taylor as well. But these people are very busy with their own stuff. I mean, Michael's going to stand in Uxbridge against Boris Johnson, and Guy's got his own court stuff as well. So we're speaking to them, and I had a conversation with Brian last week, and he's considering it because Brian once stood for UKIP, so did Roger Hayes. So these people are thinking, hold on a minute, maybe I've got a point. Maybe we should, stand. Where would you be? Totnes, would you?
Would I what?
Well, if you were to stand, if you were to consider it. The invite's there anyway.
Yeah, listen, you know, I like to operate outside.
Right.
I can do a lot more damage by pissing in.
I know, but I think you'd be good on the other side of the fence. Don't you think you'd be good?
No?
You'd be the next Dennis Skinner, don't you think?
No, because you know the problem with politics is that you get bogged down in minutiae. Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's the problem for me. Yeah. I mean, you know, I'm a bigger picture guy.
Well, of course, and I appreciate it. I'm just trying to create something that's there for the people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, and everybody's disillusioned with politics, and we need a voice, and everybody votes no without voting. So actually, get off your arse and vote no, and actually make a real difference.
Well, listen, I got to say, I think this is potentially one of the most exciting initiatives, quite possibly, since the establishment of UKIP. Unfortunately, UKIP is
asleep.
Well, it's showing more and more that it's just, you know,
puppets.
Yeah, another option. I mean, there are some particularly nasty individuals within UKIP, and I'm going to name one, Roger Helmer. Roger Helmer has been a nightmare on the issue of unconventional hydrocarbons.
And common purpose.
Really? Yeah? Oh, well, there you go. So, you know, I mean, basically, these parties have to clean house.
Yeah, exactly.
And the bottom line for me is that if you're going to embrace individuals like that, which are just another part of the corrupt establishment, and they are simply going to be corporate lapdogs, then they have no place, you know, in people's politics, if
exactly.
You like.
And I think the thing is that the politicians that are there now, they're not a true representative of the people. And, you know, 70% are legally trained, 75% are millionaires. You know, the whole thing is nuts. And probably 50% are paedophiles, yeah? But probably not, I don't know, but you get my point. And I think this is the thing, it needs a complete, you know, shift, yeah, of clean sweep of all those politicians. And it needs new parties to come forward to give the people of Britain a different option.
And it needs people with a philosophy very similar to the wonderful individual who is the president of Uruguay, who hands 90% of his salary over effectively to providing for those, helping to provide for those in his country who are not able to sustain themselves.
Yeah.
You know, Harold Macmillan said in 1958. That the people of this country had never had it so good, and back then he might have been right in the scheme of things. Maybe he knew something. Wow. Maybe he knew that it was all downhill from there, and unfortunately, that's certainly the way it's been. And you know, something has to change. I mean, obviously, what we see is the global corporatist elite are manipulating their political puppets into trying to launch World War III. Yeah. Fortunately, Vladimir Putin is a master statesman. You know, tremendous respect, as I said, I think a couple of weeks ago. You know, those people in British politics who should be taking on the role of statesman are to statesmanship what myxomatosis is to rabbits. And in fact, maybe if there was some virus that targeted corrupt politicians, then you know, we'd see immediately who you know.
Well, chance would be a fine thing, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it just? But well, I mean, I'll leave that as part of my fantasy. Meanwhile, NoTa, we're coming to the end of the show.
Okay. Yeah. Well, no-tar.org.uk is the website. As I say, it's not finished yet completely. And in a week or so, we should be completely registered and all above board with the Electoral Commission. So we're waiting to get the big tick there, and then it'll be all forces go, and we'll be inviting people to come and look at the site, join, all that, you know, get involved. Really. Well,
I think getting the word out, obviously, over the next few weeks is going to be rather critical here, because, I mean, obviously that's going to be the acid test. You know, using the alternative media, using the social media. But, you know, this, for me, Danny, is a very exciting initiative.
Thank you.
I think you've tapped into the proverbial zeitgeist of the moment.
Yeah, maybe.
And, you know, let's see how this unfolds.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on the, you know, let me come on the show. And I think the other thing is that hopefully Thursday Scotland will say yes, and next May we'll say no. Simple as that, isn't it, really? Absolutely.
So I wish all those who are voting for their independence on Thursday the very best of luck. You're going to need it, because there are those who believe that they're going to be able to manipulate whatever result they want. But then beyond that, you've got a long way to go before you achieve true independence. Thanks for joining me. Thanks to Danny Bamping for joining me tonight. I'll see you in 45 minutes with Fracking Nightmare.